Urgent, this has happened. Xi Jinping strikes at Russia without mercy. China publishes a map showing the seizure of 7 million square kilometers of territory. Putin? A sensational revelation. In Beijing, they are already openly discussing a plan to transfer control of the Far East to the PRC in the event of the Kremlin's collapse. The Chinese have learned a bitter lesson and declare vast lands must not go to waste because of chaos in Moscow. But forget about Putin's crude methods in Crimea. Beijing is acting much more cunningly and dangerously. This is a smart occupation. By investing money in the region, China is buying the loyalty of the elites, signing contracts and creating an army of pro-Chinese forces. And here are the shocking results. Siberia is officially turning into a raw materials appendage of the PRC. In Transbaikalia, the Chinese have seized control of a coal giant. Putin shamelessly zeroed out their taxes. And starting from 2027, 500 trucks will be running around the clock every day. Thank you. Exporting Russian resources to China. They are already building a special highway there where only Chinese workers are employed, depriving locals of jobs and income. The wheel of expansion has been spun to its limit. 2 million PRC citizens have already settled in the Far East. This is not just migration, it's a quiet takeover of power and territory that can no longer be stopped. A catastrophe has struck Moscow. Nature has decided to finish off the Russians. A fierce snowstorm has been paralyzing the capital for 3 days now. Traffic jams are at level 10, roads are completely blocked, totally impassable. On the highways around Moscow, there are inescapable traffic jams. People are abandoning their cars, grabbing their children and bags, and walking for 2 hours in 10-degree frost. Entry into the city is partially blocked. Trucks are skidding, turning around, lining the sides of the highways and completely blocking the lanes. The cars aren't moving, but the same can't be said for the people. In Nekrasovka, at least 150 people have chosen a human cardio workout over transportation. Bus stops and stations are no help. The only option left is to walk. Russians are forced to trudge along the highways with bags and backpacks because otherwise it's simply impossible to get home. Meanwhile, there's a blackout near St. Petersburg. Local residents have been left without electricity and water. According to eyewitnesses, only the streetlights are working and the radiators are already starting to cool down. The power grid operators have acknowledged a technical failure at the substation. The sky over Ukraine will be urgently closed. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, announced that he has given Defense Minister Fedorov 3 key tasks. These concern both protection against enemy attacks and the mobilization process. Specifically, the president outlined 3 priorities. Closing the sky together with the Air Force Commander-in-Chief Syrsky and Commander Krivonozhko to resolve the issue of busification and put an end to unresolved matters regarding the contract army. All types of contracts must function effectively in practice. Separately, the president emphasized the importance of replacing artillery with drones to avoid double spending on both directions, simultaneously. Fedorov, together with the police, is also working with the cabinet of ministers since closing the sky is closely linked to the energy sector. The world is talking about this today. They will not let it go any further. The final stretch of negotiations and an unexpected move by the US, a tragedy in a Ukrainian resort at the height of the tourist season, and the liberation of Transnistria. Let's watch. Ukraine and Russia's shock as they meet without the US. American Special Representatives Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will not participate in the new round of negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. The meeting will take place only between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. This was announced by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
At the end of last week, a meeting took place in the UAE, which, it seems for the first time in many years, included the presence of the U.S. with Jared and Steve Witkoff together with representatives from Russia and Ukraine, and they plan to continue negotiations this week. In this context, the U.S. may be present at the bilateral meeting.
Moreover, Rubio emphasized that there is already a general agreement regarding security guarantees for Kyiv. The plan envisions the deployment of troops from several European countries, French and British, in Ukraine. Next comes the American backstop. The U.S. will provide support to its allies, but will itself remain in reserve. In fact, this is the role of the last line of defense in case all other deterrence mechanisms fail.
But in reality, it is the support of the U.S. that serves as the true security guarantee. It's not that, and I'm not downplaying the fact that some European countries are ready to station troops in post-war Ukraine. I'm just emphasizing that without U.S. support, it doesn't matter. The reason such strong US support is needed is that our allies have not invested enough in their own defense for the past 20 to 30 years. I hope that will change.
And one more important message from Rubio. There is only one contentious issue left in the negotiation process regarding Ukraine. Notably, in his statement, Rubio did not specify whether the issue of the status of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant had been resolved. Perhaps he simply considered this issue part of the territorial problem.
I think the only issue that remains unresolved is the one you are all well aware of, namely the territorial claims regarding Donetsk. I know that active efforts are underway to determine whether it is possible to reconcile both sides' positions on this matter. It's still a bridge we haven't crossed, it's still a gap, but at least we've managed to narrow the issues down to one central point.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
In the
Kremlin, they confirmed that preparations are underway for new talks on February 1st. In turn, Vladimir Putin's spokesperson Peskov described the negotiations as sensitive and very complicated. And now, a sensation. Putin's team has invited Zelensky to Russia. The dictator's aide, Yuri Ushakov, voiced an ultimatum-like idea for Zelensky to visit Moscow, calling it a logical approach. Ushakov claims that it was actually the American side that suggested considering such a scenario.
By the way, the issue was discussed several times during a series of phone contacts between our president, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, and U.S. President Trump. In this series of conversations, Trump in particular suggested that we consider such a possibility.
At the same time, Putin's aide voiced a cynical proposal to hold negotiations directly in the capital of the aggressor state, promising the Ukrainian leader security.
Our president also said several times, when speaking with journalists, that if Zelensky is truly ready for a meeting, then we, by all means, invite him to Moscow and will guarantee his security and provide all the necessary conditions for work.
Let me remind you, on the eve, the head of the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha, stated that President Volodymyr Zelensky is ready to meet with the Russian leader Putin. The topics of the negotiations could include issues of territory and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. However, at the moment, there is no agreement regarding such a conversation.
These two issues, regarding the territories and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, it is precisely to resolve these that the president is ready to meet with Putin and discuss them.
And one more sensational piece of news. Social media is abuzz with claims that Kyiv forced Moscow to stop strikes on the thermal power plants. Even Russian propagandists are in shock.
All previous such attempts ended with Ukraine invading one of the regions of the Russian Federation. Probably by tradition, now there will be a dirty nuclear bomb in the Belgorod region or poisoned water in Moscow's water supply. We're waiting.
The founder of Kraken, Nemeshev, also writes about the stop command regarding strikes on the energy sector. He even publishes a screenshot of a post where this is clearly recorded. They went to ride in Bukovel, but ended up riding in an ambulance at the country's most popular ski resort, an alarming outbreak of mass poisonings. What was supposed to be a dream vacation turned into hospital beds, IV drips, and thousands of hryvnias in expenses for dozens of Ukrainians.
I thought it would pass me by, because now everyone says it's just a stomach virus. I felt so bad that night. At 8 o'clock I got really sleepy. I felt so weak, fell asleep at midnight, and then it all started. I was also worried that I might somehow infect my little one. She was whining half the night too. She was also knocking Kostya's little one. And I was worried that I might infect her too, but thank God it was only me. Chills all night long. My temperature kept swinging from cold to feverish. It was just awful. I felt so terrible.
Kyiv resident Halina is how she describes her vacation in Bukovel. I
was really scared. I couldn't get out of bed. Every 20 minutes I was vomiting. Every 5 minutes I had diarrhea.
In recent days, several dozen people with the same symptoms have been brought to the resort hospital. Severe diarrhea, relentless vomiting, high fever, and extreme weakness. On TikTok, there are dozens of videos straight from ambulances, hallways, and hospital wards. People aren't holding back their emotions and are writing that it seems like rotavirus. a dangerous infection which is especially threatening for children.
For some reason, they haven't discharged us for an hour already. Weakness, vomiting, stomach pain. Well done.
Says the well-known blogger Alexander Zalisko that the vacation is simply unforgettable.
So, an unforgettable vacation indeed. It's probably 5 days now, closer. This is where they are giving me the Jaeger.
Jaeger?
Yes, this is a hunter like that. Ugh, sweet.
Others say that now Bukovel is in the so-called trend. One of the social media users writes,
Let's go to Bukovel, go for a ride. We went for a ride. I'm on the Bukovel trend. 1 injection, tests, 5 IV drips, a bunch of pills, and 8,000 hryvnias.
Similar stories are found in Telegram communities. People admit that even maximum caution doesn't help.
We brought bottled water with us to brush our teeth, used antiseptics. And still, on the 2nd day of vacation, I got sick. And it's awful. I wouldn't wish anyone to go through that condition. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea.
And this isn't the first time. Outbreaks of infections at one of Ukraine's most expensive resorts, where a week-long stay costs tens of thousands of hryvnias, have happened before. The Regional Center for Disease Control and Prevention told BBC News Ukraine that they are monitoring the situation, but there are allegedly no official reports of mass poisonings from hospitals. The management of Bukovel and the resort's hospitals are not responding to journalists' inquiries. Halina Yakushko also became a victim of this outbreak. Her vacation ended with an ambulance call.
I was vomiting every 20 minutes in the morning, every 5 minutes, diarrhea. I couldn't get up at all. That is, there is no power, absolutely.
Hospitals have queues of the same patients. Assistance is paid.
Everyone is given the same droppers. The IV drips cost 6,000 hryvnias each. And then you buy medicine for another 2,000.
There aren't even basic medications, and the ambulance doctor openly admitted it. We
are driving these people in by the dozens all day long.
In Bukovel, Halina was never given a clear diagnosis. Already in Kyiv, the doctors ruled out poisoning and confirmed it was an infectious disease. Against the backdrop of dozens of stories from hospitals, ambulances, and social media, a logical question arises. And what about this? What does the official government say? The Ivano-Frankivsk Regional Center for Disease Control and Prevention states that they are monitoring the situation. The center confirms that they are aware of the numerous stories being actively shared by vacationers on social media. However, the official information is completely different. The center emphasizes that hospitals are required to report such cases, even if they are not widespread. The center's spokesperson, Volodymyr Dzihita, comments on the situation as follows.
We are working with medical institutions to clarify the information. Monitoring is ongoing. So for now, it's too early to talk about the causes.
At the same time, the center urges tourists to remain vigilant and follow basic hygiene rules to avoid intestinal infections. Meanwhile, earlier the State Service of Ukraine on Food Safety and Consumer Protection announced that it would initiate an inspection due to food poisoning in Bukovel. The head of the service reported this to Ukrinform. The issue of water quality in Bukovel has arisen more than once. There have also been previous reports of poisoning and outbreaks of intestinal infections at the resort. Poor water quality has often been cited as one of the possible causes. There is no centralized sewage system in the region's private guest houses. They use autonomous systems with bioseptic tanks there. Because of this, sewage waste can seep into the ground. In May 2024, the company Bukovel Invest reported that all the resort's hotels are connected to the central treatment system and that wastewater is sent to sewage treatment facilities. At the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they say that since the beginning of the year, they have checked the quality of drinking water at the resort's establishments several times. The sampling locations are not connected to each other, and according to them, the results met hygienic standards. A bolt from the blue. Russia is losing its last trump cards and spheres of influence with a bang. The head of Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha, literally blew up the information space. Statements regarding Moldova. The hour of reckoning is approaching. The presence of Russian occupiers in Transnistria has been recognized as a critical threat that must be eliminated. Kyiv has officially confirmed that Ukraine is ready to consider Chisinau's request and make a decisive contribution to the security of its neighbors. The hint is clear: Transnistria is holding its breath, awaiting the finale.
I think it's becoming increasingly obvious. The threat posed by the continued presence of Russian troops on the territory of Transnistria. and therefore the necessity of restoring Moldova's territorial integrity based on international law.
According to the minister, Ukraine is already striking at Russian influence in the region, depriving Moscow of all its levers of pressure.
We are already helping both through the development of joint border infrastructure, through Moldova's independence from Russian energy resources, and through our joint cooperation on the path to membership in the European Union. And it is very important that this should be a joint movement.
When asked directly about a military scenario, Sibiha responded firmly, "It is Chisinau's right to decide how exactly to clear its own land." Ukraine welcomes the new plan to eliminate the separatist enclave and is ready to respond to any request from Moldova for practical cooperation. In other words, if Moldova asks for help, Kyiv's response will be immediate.
We are ready to help our Moldovan friends, but we must focus specifically on our own path. Although I share the view that, in reality, the security of Ukraine and Moldova is indivisible. That is why I am glad to see that the Moldovan side clearly understands the role and importance of Ukraine in regional security.
Sibiha also touched on the topic of Belarus. The minister stated that Kyiv is moving towards a direct alliance with the democratic forces of Belarus. To coordinate this process, Ukraine is deploying the heavy artillery of a special representative who will serve as a liaison between Kyiv and the Belarusian resistance. The minister made it clear that the bridges have been burned and Ukraine will no longer pay attention to the potato dictator. The importance of this year is off the charts. Sibiha reminded that in his historic speech in Vilnius, Volodymyr Zelensky devoted almost a third of his time specifically to the Belarusian issue.
We believe that the time will come when Belarus, a democratic Belarus, will become the fourth participant in the Lublin Triangle. But as for Moldova, signals about the beginning of such actions from Moldova have been coming for quite some time.
It has become known that Chisinau is preparing a strategic plan to reintegrate Transnistria. The country, together with the European Union and the United States, is preparing a plan for the reintegration of the region, but is keeping it strictly secret. This was stated by the Deputy Prime Minister for Reintegration, emphasizing that the details will only be made public at the appropriate moment.
We are indeed actively working on a strategy or roadmap for reintegration. But as you know, sensitive issues require caution. We need to carefully consider the steps that will yield results over time. We cannot disclose every step in real time, because that could be harmful.
Ukraine has also hinted at the return of Transnistria to Moldova. Yes, the head of the presidential office, Kirilo Budanov, has hinted at this. Ukraine has sufficient military power to decisively resolve the Transnistrian issue, but it all comes down not to the army, but to major geopolitics. Despite the victory of pro-European forces in Moldova, Transnistria still remains a stronghold of Russian influence, which Moscow has maintained for over 30 years. But then came the key point. For Ukraine, this is a Russian garrison, a threat that the armed forces of Ukraine are fully capable of eliminating.
We can resolve this issue if we set our minds to it. Resolve it radically. But is it necessary to do so? This is where geopolitical questions begin. The latest opportunity for Lukashenko is a meeting with Tikhanovskaya. Zelensky launches a plan to overthrow the dictator. Urgent. While Minsk is trying to pretend that everything is under control, a political death sentence for the regime has already been signed behind the scenes. Sources report that Lukashenko is living out his last days in the president's chair. All the details. Watch. Ukraine has set its sights on Belarus. This is not the first time during the years of war that Kyiv is not just talking about a democratic Belarus, but actually starting to speak to it directly. On January 25th in Vilnius, President Volodymyr Zelensky held a full-fledged meeting with Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, the head of the United Transitional Cabinet of Belarus, which is essentially the government.
Mind. He lived in a state of forced and lonely exile for an incredibly long and arduous period of time.
For a time, contacts with the democratic opposition in Belarus were actually blocked. The office of the President of Ukraine proceeded from simple logic. Do not touch Lukashenko so as not to provoke him into even more active participation in the war against Ukraine. It was believed that a cautious distance would allow for at least the illusion of neutrality to be maintained, Minsk. But the illusion was shattered. Belarus has become an almost complete launching pad for the Russian invasion. Its territory is used to house Russian troops and weapons. And Lukashenko himself is becoming ever more deeply entangled in military and political dependence on the Kremlin.
For now, unfortunately, Lukashenko's white spitz has more rights than the people of Belarus. There was a chance in 2020 to change this, and I am sure there will be another chance. But at that time, there simply wasn't enough support for the Belarusians. And now we all feel just how much more difficult, how much more expensive, how much more dangerous it has become for everyone because of Belarus's dependence on Moscow. It has become this way for everyone due to Belarus's dependence on Moscow.
But behind the Vilnius meeting stands not only a reassessment of the past, but also a calculation for the future. Right now, the father has a real chance to break out of international isolation. In the West, there are increasingly frequent signals about the possible partial lifting of sanctions and Minsk's return to diplomatic formats, all under the guise of peace initiatives and regional stabilization. For Ukraine, such a scenario is dangerous. Legitimizing Lukashenko means preserving the Russian military bridgehead near the northern borders and an attempt to freeze Belarus, in the role of a Kremlin vassal for years to come.
Operators of Russian Shahed drones are striking Ukraine, including from the territory of Belarus. The coordination for strikes is maintained from the territory of Belarus. Russia uses Belarus as a testing ground for blackmailing Europe and the world by its loyal subordinates and collaborators. The industrial sectors across Belarus work directly for Russia's war. And these trade ties help Putin procure the essential technological components he needs to build a significant security threat against every one of us in Europe.
That's why Kyiv is taking a preemptive step. According to media reports, Zelensky and Tikhanovskaya discussed specific mechanisms for deepening cooperation, from restoring a separate Belarusian direction in Ukrainian diplomacy to legal steps, which could finally close off Lukashenko's path to international rehabilitation. This includes, in particular, the possible initiation of international criminal prosecution. For Ukraine, this is a way to eliminate the grey corridor of Russian influence near its borders.
I want to address the people of Belarus separately. You are a European people who will stand together with all our nations in unity. In our free Europe, a peaceful Europe, a strong Europe, and you cannot be erased. And
while the West hesitates, the Russians are increasingly absorbing the Belarusians. 40 kilometers from the border with Ukraine, in the Gomel region, near the Yakimivka railway station, a new training ground is being built. The main construction work is scheduled for 2027 to 2028, with funding of $52,500,000 and $86 million respectively. At the same time, construction of a military town is underway near the village of Pribor in the Gomel district. They plan to station a new airborne assault brigade there.
The placement of such a base is a direct threat to Ukraine, and this is a signal to us that we must also prepare for possible scenarios of an offensive from Russia through Belarus, and possibly the involvement of Belarus in this process.
It seems that for the first time in years, Belarusians have a real chance to break free from the shackles of Putin's regime and reclaim their freedom. To step out of Moscow's shadow, determine their own future, and build a Belarus that will be part of a free and democratic Europe.